Hi, everybody.
Hi, Laura.
Good evening and welcome to the Woodhaven Brownstown Board of Education organizational regular meeting of Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. Called to order at 5:30 p.m. This evening's meeting is taking place via Zoom. Public notice of the steps necessary to participate in this meeting were posted on the district website. Mrs. Abear, would you please take roll?
Mrs. Pimer?
Here.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mrs. Paget?
Here.
Mr. Burke? Mrs. Bauer Perry?
Here.
Mrs. Berry?
Here.
Mr. Greathead?
Here.
Mr. Belcher?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Vespremi?
Here.
Mr. Satterfield?
Here.
Mr. Salah?
Here.
Thank you.
Item number B is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's right as well.
Item C is approval of the agenda. The suggested motion is to approve the agenda as recommended. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by, sounded like Pimer, supported by,
It was motion by Barry.
oh, sorry, thank you. Motion by Barry, supported by
Harris.
Harris. Thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Paget?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Burke?
Is that including like what's in arrears? Is there any?
Mrs. Bauer Perry?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up is oath of office. Next, I will administer the two Board of Education members, Mrs. Burton Kelsey, Mr. Harris, and Mrs. Paget, their oath of office. Would those board members please repeat after me? I,
Aye.
Aye.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey, please state your name.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey.
Mr. Harris, please state your name.
Robert Harris.
And Mrs. Paget, please state your name.
Jen Paget.
Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
Solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of a member of the Board of Education
of the office of a member of the Board of Education
of the Woodhaven Brownstown School District,
of the Woodhaven Brownstown School District,
School District.
Wayne County, Michigan,
Wayne County, Michigan,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations to those 3 board members, and thank you for your continued service to the students of the Woodhaven Brownstown School District.
Thank you.
Next item is election of officers. Through the process called for in the board operating procedures, the board secretary, who was Mr. Harris, solicited nominations for board officer positions. We have a nomination for board president for Mrs. Pimer. Mrs. Pimer, do you accept this nomination?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other nominations from the board? Hearing none, the suggested motion is to elect Mrs. Pimer as president of the board as recommended. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by Burton Kelsey. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
All right,
Yeah.
so what I'll probably end up doing.
Mr. Harris,
we kinda talk
Yeah.
tonight,
Mrs. Paget,
is, and I don't know which way
Mr. Burke?
that she'll prefer to go. One option is
Mrs.
to
Bauer Perry,
kind of do what we did
Yes.
before.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up is the office of vice president of the board. We have a nomination for board vice president for Mrs. Burton Kelsey. Mrs. Burton Kelsey, do you accept this nomination?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, the suggested motion is to elect Mrs. Burton Kelsey as vice president of the Board of Education. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
When I talk, they can hear you talking. I'm at a board meeting.
Motion by Harris, is there support?
Sorry.
Members, I said.
Support. This is Jen.
Support by Paget. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke, Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes. My
Mrs.
bad.
Berry.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mrs. Burton Kelsey.
Thank you.
Next up is the position or the office of board secretary. We have a nomination for Mr. Harris as the board secretary. Mr. Harris, do you accept this nomination?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, the suggested motion is to elect Mr. Harris as secretary of the Board of Education. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Burton Kelsey, supported by Barry. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris, Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke, Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Harris. Next position is the board treasurer. We have a nomination for Mrs. Paget for board treasurer. Mrs. Paget, do you accept this nomination?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, the suggested motion is to elect Mrs. Paget as treasurer of the Board of Education as recommended. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Support.
Was that by Barry and supported by Burton Kelsey?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke, Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mrs. Paget.
Thank you.
Hello?
Sorry. Congratulations, Mrs. Paget. And
I
Mr.
can't, am I heard? Am I being heard?
We can hear you now, Mr. Burke, yes.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burke, Mrs. Bauer Perry, and Mrs. Berry will serve as trustees of the board. Thank you. Item number 4 is adoption of the 2021-22 school year Board of Education meeting schedule. The board has been provided with a draft board meeting schedule for July of 2021 through June of 2022. At this time, is there any questions or discussion regarding the proposed schedule of Board of Education meetings?
I had one item I wanted to bring up. I don't know if we need to make the motion first or if I can make comments now.
Have the discussion now.
Okay, I'm fine with it for this cycle, but I would like to just start board members thinking about perhaps having some of the board meetings later. 5:30 is really difficult for, working parents. So in looking at some of the surrounding districts or other committees that I belong to, some of those start at like a 6 or a 7 p.m. So again, not talking about the July 2021 to June 2022 calendar, but starting to think about that for future cycles of board meetings. I just wanted to get that on people's radars.
Thank you, Mrs. Paget. Any other comments? And I guess we would call this an opportunity for in general comments regarding the board calendar.
Well, the later time would be fine with me, even starting this year.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any other thoughts or comments before we look for a motion? Okay. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the schedule of board meetings as presented, representing regular board meeting dates for July of 2021 through June of 2022. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support from Paget.
Motion by Burke, supported by Paget. Any further discussion on the calendar? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item is a discussion of the 2021 calendar year committee assignments and meeting schedules. The Board of Education has been provided a draft of all meetings for the 2021 calendar year, including proposed meeting dates, mission statements, and the role and recommendation process for each subcommittee. I know that in the coming days, subcommittee assignments for 2021 will be finalized by the board president. At this time, are there any questions or is there any discussion regarding subcommittees of the board?
Can we have early information on whether the meeting is going to be face-to-face or on Zoom?
Are you talking about
Any of the subcommittee meetings?
Are you looking for the short term or for the entire year, Mr. Burke?
Well, I would assume at some point this year, there'll be more face-to-face meetings.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I'm assuming that, I could be very wrong, but I think we're going to start getting the things we need to combat the virus. So I think there'll be more face-to-face, and but until that time, I'd like to know whether the meeting would be virtual or, in person.
Yes. Yes. Until such time that they can be held in person, we will continue to hold those virtually. And even then, with the subcommittee meetings, we've afforded board members a degree of flexibility and latitude going with those as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mark, I had a question about the timing of the meetings. Those timings can be adjusted once the committees are formed, I presume?
Absolutely. Everything that's been provided to the board so far is 100% tentative, reflective of past practice, but will be entirely up to, each year we see the board committees assignments tend to shift a little bit. And so they're meant to be reflective of what is most conducive for those board members.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And
And
we'll
I
fol-
would, oh, I'm sorry, Jen.
No, that's okay. I was gonna say we'll follow the same process and send the board president our top three, right, in rank order.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, if you could do it by Thursday, if possible.
Yep, that's what I was gonna close with. If by Thursday, I was gonna give you guys till Friday, but the board president wants them by Thursday. So if by Thursday you could email your top three committee preferences to Mrs. Pimer, that'd be appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is adoption of resolutions and approvals for services. The adoption of resolution regarding designation of person for posting public notices of meetings. The suggested motion is to adopt the resolution designating Melanie Abear as the person responsible for posting public notices of meetings for the 2021 calendar year as recommended. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved. Or support.
Sounded like motion by Harris, supported by Burke. Any discussion? Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke, Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion carries. Part B, approval of authorization of the superintendent and the treasurer of the Board of Education to sign all Woodhaven Brownstown School District checks. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education authorize Mark Greathead as superintendent of schools and Jennifer Paget as treasurer of the Board of Education to sign all Woodhaven Brownstown School District checks for the 2021 calendar year as recommended. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Burke, supported by
Barry.
Barry. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke, Mr. Burke, Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Part C, adoption of resolution regarding the designation of attorney firms for legal matters, labor relations, and bonding purposes. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education adopt the resolution designating the following firms for representation regarding legal matters, labor relations, and bonding purposes for the 2021 calendar year as recommended. They are Foley and Robinette, Miller, Johnson, Seacrest, Wardle, Lynch, Hampton, Truex, and Morley, and the Troon Law Firm. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by
Paget.
Paget. Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Does the one law firm changing its name have any effect on us as who will be representing us?
That's a great question, but no, the Miller and Johnson Law Firm, we will still have Kevin Sutton working with us in terms of our policy review, revision, and development.
Thank you.
If there's no other discussion, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry, Mrs.
Yes.
Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item D, adoption of resolution regarding the designation of the following financial institutions. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education adopt the resolution designating the following financial institutions for the 2021 calendar year as recommended. They are Ambic Securities, Baker Tilly Virchow Cross, BMO Harris Bank, Comerica Bank, Fifth Third Bank, Fifth Third Securities, Flagstar Bank, Huntington Bank, Level One Bank, PFM Asset Management, and PNC Financial. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Barry. That was
Motion by Barry, supported by Burton Kelsey. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the organizational portion of our board meeting this evening. We'll now move on to the regular portion of our board meeting, and we'll start with hearing of the public. The Woodhaven Brownstown School District Board of Education affords members of the community 2 opportunities to address the board at its meetings. The first opportunity is now, at the beginning of the meeting, so that the community may be heard on issues that appear on the meeting agenda. The second opportunity for the community to be heard is towards the end of the meeting and is reserved for items that do not appear on this evening's agenda. In both cases, the individual time limit for addressing the Board of Education is 5 minutes. Individuals wishing to address the Board of Education regarding items on the agenda should raise their hand at this time in Zoom, and when called upon, please state and spell your name. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. The suggested motion is to approve the consent agenda as recommended. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Burke, supported by Harris. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have personnel recommendations. The following recommendations have been reviewed by the personnel, the HR committee of the Board of Education. We have 2 professional staff recommendations this evening for the board to consider en masse. They are Sarah Zalay, Waginka Elementary School teacher, 3rd grade, effective 1/13/21, and Haley Turner, also Waginka Elementary School teacher, 5th grade, effective 1/13/21. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by Burke. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget, Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Roberts, who is our Director of Human Resources, if you could please introduce the 2 newest members of our professional staff.
Yes, Sarah Soleil comes to us from the University of Michigan, where she graduated in 2006. She took postgraduate coursework from the University of Pacific. For the past 2 years, she's worked as a paraprofessional and building substitute for multiple WBSD buildings. And prior to that, she worked for Sylvan Learning Center and the Creative Learning Campus. And her last building sub position was at Waginka, and that's where she was identified as a top teaching candidate for us.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
Yeah, nice to have you
Sarah.
permanent.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard. There you are. And
Thank you. Very excited. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Board of Education looks forward to having the opportunity to formally meet you in person, hopefully in the very near future.
Mrs. Turner has joined us from Eastern Michigan University, and she just completed her student teaching at Waginka 5th grade in Mr. Satterfield's class, which is where we identified her as a top candidate. While attending Eastern Michigan University, she worked for the Riverview Recreation Center and was the assistant site coordinator for Eastern Michigan University's Bright Futures program.
Haley, welcome. Give everybody a big wave there, please, along with that smile. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Nice to have you on board.
Thank you.
Just like Sarah, before you there, the Board of Education and I look forward to having you here in person in the very near future when we have an opportunity to meet you. But welcome aboard. We look forward to the great things that both of you will bring to the Woodhaven Brownstown School District.
Mark, a question.
Yeah.
Will you personally provide something to them from the Education Foundation?
Yes.
Did I just blow your cover?
You did not blow any cover. We
Okay,
have a
good.
small token of appreciation and a little something to help all of our new teachers get started. And so Sarah and Haley, both myself and a couple of representatives from the Woodhaven Brownstown Education Foundation will be visiting you very soon with that small award for you. So thank you. Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next, we have 2 support staff recommendations for the board to consider this evening. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the following employments as recommended. They are Priscilla Albano, Special Services Paraprofessional, effective 1/13/21, and Monique Cage, Class B, Woodhaven Brownstown School District Receptionist, also effective 1/13/21. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by Burton Kelsey. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke, Mr. Burke, Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Roberts, would you please introduce these 2 individuals to the Board of Education?
Yeah, Priscilla Albana has been working as a substitute through EduStaff since 2015. And I know she's on this Zoom with us. And for the past few years, she's worked extensively at BMS, and she was highly recommended for the position by the BMS staff. And that's how we identified her. So welcome, Priscilla.
Congratulations, Priscilla, and welcome aboard. Look forward to seeing you and working with you here in the Woodhaven Brownstown School District.
And our next candidate, Monique Cage, I think all of you will be seeing quite a bit of, because she is going to be the registration face of our district and the first face that many people see when they register and come to our district. Monique has been working as a paraprofessional at multiple buildings in Woodhaven Brownstown School District for the past 3 years. Prior to that, she had 3 years of experience at Rock Connection as an administrative assistant. And so we're looking forward to her joining us at the front and being the greeting face for our young 5s and kindergartner students.
Yes, I'm happy. Thank you all.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Having seen you in the district and the way you work with those little kids over the last 3 years, while I'm sad that you won't be working with those little guys, we're very happy to have you over here at Central Office, and I'm very proud to be able to have you in that position. So thank you, Monique.
Monique, I can tell by your smile and your wave that you're going to do a wonderful job representing us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I know I will.
Okay, thank you. Item number 10 is board member recognition. Serving on a board of education is sometimes described as the toughest volunteer job in America. Members of the Woodhaven Brownstown School District Board of Education spend countless personal hours in meetings, school functions, and in preparation for the decisions they make. This school year, more than any other school year in the history of the Woodhaven Brownstown School District, the WBSD Board of Education has made tough decisions and developed policies for the safety and betterment of our children and staff. This mature Board of Education now totals 61 years of board service. So congratulations to you guys. As a community, we are very fortunate to have a Board of Education that is committed to providing the best educational experience possible for all students. In recognition of your service, a small token of appreciation has been left at your front porches. I personally thank you for all that you do. Congratulations to Mickey and Rob and Jen on your reelection. And thank you to each and every one of you for your continued service to the students here of our school district.
Thanks, Mark. We couldn't do it without your leadership. Thank you.
Thanks. It's an honor to serve with you guys.
Item number 11 is the Woodhaven Brownstown School District Extended Continuity of Learning Plan. Grades young 5 through 12th grade in the Woodhaven Brownstown School District will continue in our hybrid learning model until this Friday, January 15th. On Tuesday, January 19th, students enrolled in in-person learning will return to everyday attendance and instruction. Our two-way interaction rates for the month of December were 99.46 for the week of December 2nd through the 8th, 99.6 for the week of December 9th through the 15th, and 96.7 for the 3 days, December 16th through the 18th. Are there any questions or concerns from the Board of Education regarding the Woodhaven Brownstown School District's extended continuity of learning plan?
Mark, my only question is the communication to our parents and when that will be going out that we plan to resume. I don't know that everybody would be on the same page, you know, have the same information that we've distributed in the past. So when will you send out that communication?
I will ask that our building principals reaffirm, just as the board is reaffirming this evening, the plans that we communicated and set forth for them back before winter break. So I'll ask that our building administration do that first thing tomorrow.
I will say I know at least for BMS and the high school, because I have students at both, that on their weekly communication, that has been on there every week since we went hybrid.
Thank you. I did not know that. Thank you.
I would just like to add that I continue to think that offering our parents a choice is still the right thing for us to do. So I support our current plan continuing.
Thank you, Mrs. Berry.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, and it doesn't have to be right now, but I know for the secondary buildings, the surveys were due for parents that wanted to change. And I was just wondering how those came in and what, you know, what that does to scheduling and stuff for the second semester. And again, it doesn't have to be right now, but
If I was just shooting from the hip, I'd tell you that, yeah, Patrick Henry, there was minimal movement, but the movement that was requested resulted in a wash, and it was fairly easy to schedule. I know at Woodhaven High School, they're still working through the scheduling process, but I'll get a more detailed and in-depth answer for you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Any other
I have a
comments?
question, Mark.
Yes.
So just something to think about, you know, those who chose in line, or excuse me, in person, we pretty much have had a lot of hybrid the whole year, and which is fine for a while, but I mean, we can't predict what's going to happen over the next, you know, month, 2 months. But, you know, is there a reason why we haven't thought about, you know, I know we're doing the hybrid because it's a less kids in the classroom, so there's we can space them out better. If we thought about, like, if we're doing the hybrids for the kids that are in person, that there be an opportunity for them to Zoom into the class. So that way, instead of them having the day off, and I don't say they have the day off, they're supposed to have homework, but we all know what that looks like from a parent perspective as far as what the kids actually get up and do. I mean, is there a thought about doing that? I mean, having Zoom, having it so the kids, even though they're not in the classroom in person, they are now Zooming in that class and they're still getting some type of like some type of teaching instruction?
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, I hope that we do not have to return to a hybrid model again.
Right.
That being said, what you've suggested there was discussed at length and continues to be discussed, but it does present some challenges from the perspective of, if we're Zooming what's going on in the classroom, our teachers need to be very, very protective of the students that are in person, that their rights aren't violated by broadcasting it via Zoom to those on the other end of the computer. And it is a little bit different than what takes place in a whole class Zoom meeting. In a whole class Zoom meeting, that model was chosen with the understanding that every student was going to be online. But it does present some challenges for us to preserve and protect the educational rights of the in-person student. And in doing so, in the ways we've looked at it, it can really start to alter the pedagogy of the teacher and the delivery of instruction. So I'm not saying I'm not saying that your idea is completely off the table. It's something that we continue to think about, and we'll look at ways of doing if we find ourselves in the unfortunate situation of having to go back into a hybrid model. But first and foremost, my hope and expectation is that the hybrid model is behind us come the end of this week.
I know
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Rob.
No, I know there's some teachers at the high school that are giving an option to students if they're Monday, Wednesday, that they can watch the Tuesday, Thursday classes, with any, just to observe or whatever. I know my son has done that a couple times.
And that's where we've started to offer that on some case by case or limited type opportunities, but certainly it's not something that we've offered or been able to find a way to offer wide scale. So, yeah.
And I think like addressing that or somehow explaining that to parents, those who have chosen in person, some people are frustrated, and obviously we don't have a choice as a school district. We're doing what we're supposed to do by the orders and different things that are coming out from our from the health department. But I think explaining to parents is important because some parents just assume, well, I don't understand, if we're now hybrid, why my kids don't get instruction on their off days. Like, I think that's a good thing to explain to parents, because I asked that question because I knew the answer, but I think people need to hear it. And I think they need to understand, like you said, the implications of being able to protect the students that are in the classroom. And I think some parents don't know that. And I think it's important for us to explain that so they know as a district, we're not just saying, oh yeah, just whatever, your kids can work from home. We would love to give instruction if we could, but there's a challenge that we face based upon these things.
Great. Something we will continue to work on and consider. Any other thoughts or comments regarding our extended continuity of learning plan?
No, I will just make one more comment. I was listening to something, I think it was earlier this week. There was a panel discussion of some Michigan, superintendents and administrators and teachers. And I was listening to an interview, and a lot of them were really frustrated after the year that we had in 2020, going into the holiday break, not being able to even relax during the holiday breaks because they constantly had to keep up with data and numbers and perhaps change their return to school model in January. And it got me thinking that I think what we put in place with the hybrid model coming back for 2 weeks and, communicating that out at the end of last year. I guess I just hope that gave the staff, both, teachers, administrators, and central office staff, the opportunity to kind of decompress and enjoy their holiday break. And parents as well, knowing what we were coming into for the first part of this, this new calendar year, to hear some of the stories of the people that weren't able to relax and reconnect with their families when it was needed, I think more than ever. I felt really bad for them, and I hope that wasn't the case for anyone that supports the students.
Thank you, Mrs. Paget. Are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I will take that as an affirmation of our extended continuity of learning plan. Thank you very much. Item 12, under business, we have under new business, approval of contract for Plant Moran Cressa. This recommendation has been reviewed and supported by the Facilities and Operations Committee of the Board. The Plant Moran Cressa was our owner's representative through the 2015 bond within the Woodhaven Brownstown School District. They performed an essential function for the district in helping the bond finish on time and under budget. This recommendation is for Plant Moran Cressa to continue in that capacity, performing similar services for the upcoming potential 2021 bond. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the Plant Moran Cressa Capital Planning and Owner Representation Services Contract as recommended. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by Burton Kelsey. Is there any discussion?
I see Mike clicked on there. Just a question for Mike, that he got confirmation on the role of Rob going forward with Plant Moran and our new bond.
Yes, we have had that discussions, and Mr. Terrio's on the call, and so is Rob. We have had the discussions with the continuation of Rob.
That he'll lead the operation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Rob Kokoski will be the leader in the district with the expectations of the 3-4 days a week with an additional person underneath him. But Rob will be the leader as far as, he will be the front person for Plant Moran Cressa.
All right. And his son will also join the conference calls? Continue.
So from time to time, he will, depending on what his school requirements are.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer? Mrs. Pimer? Mrs. Burton Kelsey?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Paget?
Yes.
Mr. Burke? Mrs. Barr Perry?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item is the architectural contract with GMB Architecture and Engineering. The following recommendation has been reviewed and supported by the Facilities and Operations Committee of the Board. 5 architectural firms were interviewed by the Administration and Facilities and Operations Committee of the Board for services related to the potential 2021 bond. The recommendation of that committee is to award contract for professional architectural and engineering design services to GMB Architecture and Engineering. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by Burton Kelsey. Is there any discussion?
I just want to let the rest of the board know the innovation and of the proposal and the previous jobs and the team that was proposed by GMB, I felt was far and above of any of the other recommendations or proposals that we've seen as a subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, I would also like to just offer my congratulations for such a great presentation and for the hard work that we anticipate happening. And as part of the interview committee, it was extraordinarily interesting to see the kinds of things that were proposed and hopefully will be brought to fruition. So it was an interesting interview process.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other discussion, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer, Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke, Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Under reports, superintendent's report, the following resignation has been accepted. Renee DiLorenzo, Wagenka Elementary School, third grade teacher, effective December 18th, 2020. I'd also like to report that it has been a smooth restart of the school year coming out of winter break. Thank you to the Woodhaven Brownstown School District, teachers and support staff, administration for their continued efforts. We look forward to announcements from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the Michigan High School Athletic Association in the coming days so that we can provide clear guidance and expectations going forward. As you may or may not know, the most recent pandemic order, emergency order from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services is set to expire on January 15th. However, we do fully anticipate within the next day or so, we will learn the new parameters or a new emergency order. And the Michigan High School Athletic Association is prepared for winter athletics to begin on January 16th, yet that is still contingent upon the Department of Health and Human Services. Kudos to our transportation department on a 100% safety rating from the Michigan State Police. And a big thank you to Sodexo, especially the Sodexo staff at Brownstown Middle School. I received a nice note today reflecting how they go above and beyond in meeting the needs of our students, both in school and our remote students. Just a reminder to the entire Woodhaven Brownstown School District community, please continue to practice good hygiene, maintaining social distancing as much as possible, completing the daily health screeners with fidelity, and staying home when not feeling well. Thank you very much. Item 14 is hearing of the public. Individuals wishing to address the board regarding items that did not appear on this evening's agenda should raise their hand in Zoom. And when called upon, please state and spell your name. Thank you. Seeing none, I will now turn it over for comments from members of the Board of Education.
I just had a question regarding the last superintendent's report and more directed towards HR. It's just, I know there was a summary on the assistant principal position at BMS. Just wondering if there's a date that's set for the position to be filled. And then also, is there interim support that's happening there right now, or?
So I can give you a quick update on that. Currently, there is, we're not using interim support because we're on the slow start return. When we come back, we will be utilizing a building sub as necessary, working with Mr. Clark on that. We're set to interview. We finalized candidates after the screener day. We had 160 applicants and we screened over 60. We got it down to 10 applicants, it looks like. We're going to look to do interviews next Thursday and Friday and hope to bring it to the board meeting on the first meeting in February. We will be asking for board participation in the interview rounds. And I know I've talked to one board member already that is offered to be a part of it. I'm going to be reaching out to them tomorrow to finalize the times.
All right. And out of that 10 applicants, how many are internal versus external?
Well, so we had, of the 160 total applicants, we had 7 internals. 4 internals are being selected to move forward.
Okay.
So yes.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other board member comments?
I'll just mention that this week on Thursday is our monthly parent advisory committee meeting for special education. And we have a presentation on dealing with conflict and mental health breaks that information was shared with the special ed Woodhaven Brownstown School District Remind. And I think Miss Abear posted it to our website as well. And just I'll comment, just for those of you that saw Miss Albano's name, she's our other PAC member that serves with us as well. So if that name sounded familiar to you, that's because she serves on the PAC with me. So that's all I have.
I just wanted to say thank you to the board members who stepped up to fill officer positions again. It's much appreciated. I know it's an extra job on top of what we already do. So thank you for continuing to take those roles.
Thanks, Laura.
If there are no other comments from the board, then let me just close by once again thanking each and every board member as it is Board Member Appreciation Month. Next thank you will come next January. So thank you. With that, the meeting stands adjourned at 6:19 p.m. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
So everybody be safe.
Thank you.
Bye.